Welcome to another exciting episode of the Business Bourbon and Cigars podcast, where we bring you the best in business leadership and strategy. I'm your host, Scott Joseph, and today we have an incredible guest joining us, someone who truly embodies the concept of moving from operator to owner in business. And we're going to dive deep into how to transform your business so it doesn't own you, so that way you can live the life you deserve. My guest today is Peter Mohr. He's a business owner since 1994. He's the host of Business Owner Breakthrough Podcast. He's a seasoned entrepreneur who has dedicated his career to helping other business owners achieve real freedom by implementing clear, actionable frameworks. Pete is the founder of Simplifying Entrepreneurship. He's a certified exit planning associate and is an expert in getting businesses ready to transition smoothly. He has spent over 29 years in the trenches of entrepreneurship, and today he's here to share his wisdom on how to move from operator to owner and build a self-managing business. So before we jump in today, do me a favor, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to Me Plus Ultra at meplusultra.com and subscribe at the Me Plus Ultra Network, which is our YouTube channel. So that way you can stay up to date on all the valuable things that we do in terms of business leadership, entrepreneurship, and more. You don't want to miss the invaluable insights today and on the upcoming episodes. So Pete, man, welcome to Business Bourbon and Cigars.
Thanks so much for having me, man. I'm excited to be here with you and your listeners.
I love this topic, and we're talking pre-show, and we're going to dive into the specifics of this soon. But I do these twice a year with the Me Plus Ultra Mastermind group. We do in-person events as well, called Business Bourbon and Cigars.
Yeah.
And by the way, you a bourbon or cigar? Are you a bourbon drinker or?
I actually love rye, but I do drink bourbon as well. So I'm a rye drinker. I'm from Canada, so it's like, hey, we have more rye here than we do bourbon, but I love a good bourbon too. And as far as cigars go, I've had a few. I just it's not my thing. But I find cigars polarizing. You either love the smell of them or you don't. I love the smell of them. I just don't smoke them myself.
I hear a lot of people with that. I do it. It slows down time for me. It's almost like, how coffee can be the process of just enjoying a cup. That's how a cigar is for me.
Yeah, man.
But it's interesting you say rye, because next week we've got our Business Bourbon and Cigars Leadership Retreat.
I saw that.
And we always do some rare stuff. So a couple ryes we're going to be introducing. We've got the Michter's 10-year rye. So we're doing that. And then we're also doing the Peerless Double Oaked rye. So
I haven't had those.
A couple of the ryes. Yeah.
Awesome. Exciting.
This show excites me because when I'm trying to get people to our leadership retreat, the number one excuse from a participation standpoint I hear is, oh, we're swamped at the store. We're swamped doing this. I can't get away, all this other stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, well, first off, I've got 3 dealerships and I've got a marketing agency. And now, I could basically say Me Plus Ultra, the information we're trying to pass along is a startup, which requires a lot of time.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm not saying this to impress anybody, but really to impress upon people that there's no way these people are busier than what I'm doing right now. And I find time over and above what I do to always do personal development and self-improvement type stuff. I'm always trying to improve and learn. And that requires me to take time away. And you can't do that without what you're going to educate us on today. So I really appreciate this show. I think this helps literally everyone in our audience. So I was excited when I saw you, when we started getting together and arranging this. To start off with this, tell me a little bit about your journey as an entrepreneur. Like, what led you to develop these frameworks that you're using today?
Long story short, and you mentioned it in the intro, I've been at this since 1994. And along my journey, I came out of business school, worked for another person, my dad's best friend, actually, who I'm named after, for about 6 months. And he said to me, he was a really entrepreneurial guy too. And he said, Pete, he goes, I think you need to do your own thing. And I said, I think I do too. So I actually bought a franchise. I was young. I was 23. Bought a little franchise, went down to Atlanta for franchise training for a few weeks, came back and kicked it off. That franchise was in bathroom remodeling. We refinished bathtubs. We refinished kitchens. We did all sorts of different things, held a spray gun for, 15 years. All of these things along the journey. But that particular franchise, because I have owned franchise businesses, sold 3 times in 5 years. And after that third time, I'm like, hey, I'm not doing this anymore, because these franchisors were not, in the ballpark of what I was looking to do. So I bought out my franchise and went my own way. And I'm proud to say that about 2 weeks ago, that business experienced its 30th anniversary. We sold it back in 2009, and it's still going strong. The current owner basically called me and he said, hey, you had it for 15 years. I've had it for 15 years. Still a good business. And rolls along. And we've had other businesses too, cleaning franchise that we grew from, bought it sort of in a distressed situation with only 30 clients, and we built it up to 300 clients and sold it. Became a business broker, helping people buy and sell businesses, which is where I found a business that I currently own. We own a couple of shoe stores here in Canada. So we continue to run those since 2010. And I've had a few other little ventures along the way. And I spend most of my time these days coaching other business owners and speaking to people like you in the audience here today, and up on stage at different events and things like that, all around creating this business that's going to provide you the life that you're looking to live as a business owner. And so many times, Scott, and you kind of mentioned it too, so many times people get into business and they have this vision of being a business owner and having this better life, but they're not actually living the better life. And I think that's the problem.
Oh, amen to that. You can become a prisoner to it.
Yeah, for sure. Most do. Most do.
And that's not a fun experience. I love the diversity of all the different things you've done as an entrepreneur. I'm curious, and we're going to dive into the frameworks.
Yeah.
In a little bit. I don't want to jump ahead, but
yeah, that's good.
How I'm confident, because I see it on my end. How is the proven? I'm sure you got in these frameworks, these proven processes.
Yeah.
And have you noticed, it doesn't matter the vertical that you're in, you can take versions, maybe even the complete thing, and it applies and it works no matter where you go. Yeah.
It's so true. And I mean, I've needed these things along the way. Like you, I'm a never-ending learner. I'm always, trying to figure out what the next best step is, going to conferences, doing things, reading books, listening to podcasts, all these kind of things in order to make my life and my business better. And I've come up with a few of my own. Depending on when this gets released on September 10th, I've got my own little book. And this one was based on the 5P framework. It's called The Business Owner Breakthrough, which is the name of my podcast that you mentioned, but it'll be out on Amazon. And that's all around a framework called the 5Ps. And the 5Ps really are fundamental. And basically, it's understanding your promise, aligning your product, your process, and your people to that promise so that you can have the right amount of profit. And that when you have the right amount of profit, then the big thing is, what am I going to do with it? And this is where a lot of business owners have the issue, because they've worked their way, they've done what they needed to do to have more money, but they might not necessarily have a better life because of it either. I mean, if you're still tied to your business 70 hours a week, is that really what you got and signed up for?
Yeah, you talk a lot about moving from operator, right, which is what you're talking about right now, to owner in a business. So why is that shift so important? And then probably more importantly to a lot of the audience is, when's the right time for the entrepreneur to make that shift?
I think it's different for every business owner, and depends on the business as well. But I think you need to go in with the idea that you're not going to be doing everything. You're not going to be making every decision. I mean, the reality of it is that if you're making every decision, there's only so much time in a day. There's only so many hours. There's only so many decision-making juices within your body. And if you're making all those lower level decisions, then you don't have the juices for the bigger level decisions, and you don't have the energy, you don't have the power, you don't have the strength, you don't have the thoughts, all of these things. If you're not giving yourself time off to rebuild and recharge, all of these different things create stunts in growth and create sort of limitations on what you can do for your future of your business and the future of the freedom that you want for you and your family and your legacy as a business owner and a family person.
Yeah, and it goes back to, where's the best use of your time as an owner? I think early on, if you're in a startup mode, clearly
you got to do it.
Yeah, you got to do what is needed to be able to, and then scale it up to where you can become more of an owner. But man, once you become an owner, the breakthroughs, you really begin to have groundbreaking things when you start spending more time on it instead of in it.
Yeah.
And I think, but to your point, it's also a lot more enjoyable. So,
it's so much better when it starts off kind of like this. It's like, if you can carve out an hour a week to actually write down and journal and do some things that have to do with not your day-to-day, not putting out the fires, but the future of your business, the future of your life, how you want it to look, all of these things. If that's all you can carve out, then carve it out on Monday morning before you start all your rigors of your regular week. But as you start working through this and getting, it's almost addictive, where you want to be spending most of your time doing this and less time making those sort of smaller decisions, let's say. And, let's frame it back into your situation, Scott. You have 3 car dealerships, you've got the marketing agency, you've got this coming on. How, making those moves from 1 car dealership to 2, and from 2 to 3, and then from wrapping these 3 and saying, hey, I'm going to dig back into the marketing agency and add on a couple of other pillars over here. And now I'm going to put on business Bourbon and Cigars podcast. Like, all of these things couldn't have happened if you didn't have the freedom within the businesses that you ran, and you didn't have the structure, the process, the accountability aligned with that, so that you've moved from what I call from detail of all of those things to dashboard of all of those things. Because as owners, we want to play in the dashboard line. We don't want to play in the detail line.
That's right.
Be in the details on the stuff you really love to do. If you really love it, then play in those details. That's fine. But if you don't love it, let's find somebody who does. Bring them in. If they aren't already on your team, bring them in. They're going to do a better job than you. They're going to love what they do. And it allows you to spend the time loving what you love to do within your business or outside of your business.
God, it's so funny you say that. There was a stretch with our agency. So J&O Marketing started off as a direct marketing, a lot of direct mail, email, landing pages type stuff, high impact sale events, promotions. About 2011, we went to full on digital marketing. It was a very difficult pivot. We had a sales team that was used to selling. They could go to one decision maker. It was a much quicker selling cycle, a lot less to learn, moving into a lot more detail, more people involved in the decision-making process, because who we were selling to, the final decision maker, they didn't want to learn digital either, right? They don't, so they relied on someone. So now we got the influencer that can't make the decision, and they want all the detail. So there was a period of time where I had a foot in and a foot out. And I had a guy running it. And he was the one who was really spearheading our digital marketing approach.
Yeah.
Brilliant guy, Jamil Zabaneh. He's our president today. But while I had that foot in and foot out, that was a horrible cultural thing. For one, who are we listening to? Sometimes I had this idea, he might have another. And I guess where I'm going with this is at one point I said to myself, and I can remember it clearly. I said, why am I so happy in the dealership world and running those businesses? And why is this causing me, my first love in business, why is this causing me so much stress and becoming a pain in my ass? And I finally said, well, because you let the guy that is your managing partner of the dealerships do it, and you get out the shit out of his way. That's why. And I said, why are you not doing it with this? And it was whether it was ego, control, all the things that come in, fear of letting that go. And what do I do? We talked about this. What do I do next?
Mm-hmm.
This is what I'm currently doing.
Mm-hmm.
Once I did that, the growth has shot. We have one guy, growth is through the roof. So to your point, and I want to dive into how to effectively do this, because I feel like I lucked into it. All right. And it took longer than it should have. So where I want to really get with you is, how do we do this in a way? I want to shorten that learning curve for the audience. But I got to tell you, once that happened, life is much more enjoyable. And I come up with great ideas still, and I shoot them to him. And half the time, not even half the time, he listens and might integrate something. Most of the time, 90% of the time, he just does his own thing. But it doesn't upset me anymore, because what I've realized, no matter how good my idea is, if he isn't bought in and or views other things as a much higher priority, in the end, it all suffers. I've got to let him focus on the things that he thinks are the highest priority and what will impact the company the most. Right or wrong, it still is a net positive compared to a net negative doing it the other way I was doing it. So give us some of your early frustrations. I want to know. So that's mine, right? I want to know your early frustrations you faced as a business owner. And how did you turn those into freedoms? Let's give the audience some things to avoid and things they need to make sure they do to shorten this curve.
I'll give you one of mine that goes back many years now. I just got back. We're recording here just after Labor Day and went out west. I've got a couple of kids living out west now. So went out to the mountains in just outside of Calgary near Banff and Canmore. Enjoyed a great Labor Day weekend with the family. One of my sons flew off to, as we came back, he hopped in a plane yesterday and is moving to Australia. So he's in the plane right now, heading to Australia with his girlfriend. And, one of my biggest ones was the way I'm saying this is, was a family trip. And this is back early in my early years. And I had booked this family trip. Back then, we couldn't afford to fly the family down to Florida. We used to drive down. We have 3 boys, and we'd put them in the van and let's go. So this one time with one of the businesses, my general manager quit about 4 or 5 days before our trip. And he knew our trip was coming up, and he quit and didn't even give notice. He just said, I'm done, and walked out. And that, my trip, the family trip was planned, all this stuff's going on. So I ended up hopping in the car, drove my family to Florida, got in a plane, came back to run my business for the week, flew back down on Friday night to Florida to drive them home the following Sunday or Monday, whatever it was. And they enjoyed a week in Florida, and I traveled back and forth and got them back home. And that was a big frustration for me. I'm like, you mean to say I've been in business, I don't know what it was at the time, maybe 4 or 5 years, and I can't get away for at least a 1-week vacation without big interruption from, anything basically happening. And I mean, losing a general manager is a big one, but at the same time, it's just like, it really gave me a different mindset around cross training and process and making sure that the next person is ready to go, and all of this sort of stuff in your accountability chart, so that when you're aligning all of this stuff, it's like, do you have what you need? Have you tested and tried the next person in line to see if they can tackle this? And so, I didn't have that stuff in place. Yeah. It wasn't ready to go, and I paid the consequence. And from that perspective, it's like, I have spent the last 25 years or so since then really trying to make sure, to the best of my ability, that we had good process, that we had cross-trained people, that we had people that could fill in the gaps wherever was at any level, so that decisions could be made without me.
How do you get that? How do you get that person? So I get the process. How do you get that person? what's the process you go through, I guess, in the sense to, I mean, yeah, let them fail, let them
Yeah.
get out there and do all that stuff. But talk to me about that process. Like, how did you get the right person, and
Yeah.
how did you coach them up, and did you
Mhm.
tell them this is what I'm hoping you're going to be doing? Were those type of discussions happening? Give us
Yeah.
kind of, what's that look like?
I think everybody, part of the 5P process is your people, right? And
Yeah.
having the right people in place. So I'm also a Kolbe coach. So I don't know whether you've ever taken your Kolbe assessment or not, but I'm a certified Kolbe coach. So I'm a real big believer in the Kolbe assessment. And, I'm not going to spend the whole podcast talking about that today, but essentially we do use Kolbe as part of our onboarding and understanding who that person is, how they make decisions, and then overlaying that into their job position and what we call right fit hiring. And so really, we've made a lot of mistakes over the years in hiring. It can be very, very costly, both for the team, for the culture, and in the pocketbook. And so my philosophy is try and get as many of these things down ahead of time before that hire. And so we want to make sure that they're going to be able to tackle a job. We also want to make sure that they're going to be a good cultural fit. And I think, there's a lot of things you can do in your organization if you have good process and good people to train up people. But if they're not the good cultural fit, that's a problem. And it's something you really can't change. People don't change in that perspective. They can be trained. They can be taught how to do things. They don't change culturally very often. So it's like that's such a big piece, I think, Scott, to getting it right. So one of the things we've done in order to do this sort of stuff along the way when we're hiring is we've added discovery days. And so I did this back in the days when we used to clean sinks, toilets, and urinals for 300 restaurants and all of that sort of stuff. So what we used to do to bring in these right people is say, hey, listen, we start our routes at 5 a.m. and you're done by 12. And we have a working interview. And so after the first interview, if we think they're good, show up tomorrow morning at 5 o'clock and you're going to run route with us for an hour or two and see if you're good. Because everybody says, oh yeah, I can do that, until they get down on their hands and knees in front of the toilet, scrubbing out the toilet, scrubbing out the urinal, changing the air fresheners, doing that sort of stuff at 5 a.m. And a lot of times they never showed up. It's like, they're obviously not the right fit. Yeah. So all of these little tests and things along the way of the hiring process is how we bring in good people. And it's just sort of been designed. But Discovery Day has been a big thing. And we use Discovery Day, whether it's for hiring a bookkeeper, whether it's for hiring a salesperson on Shootopia, or hiring a cleaner back in the Sandy service days. It doesn't matter. But understanding if they're going to be a good fit. Are they going to be on time? Are they going to be able to do it? Are they going to be able to bend down and do what they need to do? Are they going to be able to actually converse with customers if they're on the sales floor? Are they going to be able to actually open QuickBooks and show me how to pull a report if they're going to be a bookkeeper? Like all of these different things in the testing and trying of the different stages of bringing the right fit person on board become how you bring in the right person to become a leader within your organization too.
Well, I think you just gave us a great segue into what we mentioned earlier. You have a lot of frameworks, right?
Yeah.
And it's all about how can we take, I guess, if a business owner is looking to gain more freedom, give us some of the frameworks that you've developed, that you feel like have had the biggest impact on accomplishing that.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned the 5P one, but another one that I really like, and this is more on the 5P is more operationally, right? And the one I kind of like more on the leadership side of things is called the CPA. And that's not your chartered professional accountancy. It's really around mastering these other three things as a leader: communication, process management, and accountability. Those are the three things that are going to help you with your freedom. Those are the three things that are going to help you level up into the owner's position. There's nothing you can do more than be a good communicator, ensuring those processes are in place so that whomever you're assigning accountability to can actually tackle it, do it, and be accountable for it, so you can get out of those details, move to the dashboard, and you're basically aligning and assigning the different things that happen, the ongoing cogs and wheels and conversations and stuff within your business to happen without you in a way that you're comfortable with. And until you start having that, this is one of the biggest problems, Scott, is that most people feel uncomfortable about aligning and assigning authority. So they don't.
Yeah. I love this because I'm sitting here listening to you talk about CPA, and I'll rehash this. So communication, process, and accountability.
Yeah.
Not only does it give an owner more freedom, but it's probably the key framework when it comes to building the right culture.
Yeah.
It's right. You're never going to get freedom without the right culture. That's one thing. But the right culture creates better client experiences. You retain more clients. It's easier to attract new business. It's easier to attract future employees. It's easier to retain employees. Culture is the whole thing. And when I sit there, I don't know how familiar you are with the book Unreasonable Hospitality.
I haven't read that one.
Very good book. Number one restaurant in the world. I think we'll make sure, 11 Park Madison up in New York. Man, it's the communication and the culture is the first thing he tackled. It wasn't about, hey, let's do this for our clients first. Let's do that. It was about exactly what you just said, literally. So I love the fact success leaves clues, right? And here's a big one. And I love what you just said there. So if you're listening or watching this, make sure that is something you write down. Of course, you can always go back and rewatch it or re-listen and share this. What do you see the biggest roadblock in terms, for entrepreneurs trying to move from operations to, and it could be just a lack of process or whatever it might be, but what do you see?
I mean, I really do think it's the idea that we just talked about. It's this idea that they're uncomfortable in letting go. And, we talked about great books. I read a great book years ago, and it's called Tiny Habits by B.J. Fogg. And one of his sort of, let me see if I remember this now. I wasn't ready to chat about this one, but it's a great little framework. And it's called B equals MAP, I believe it is. Yeah. So B
MAP?
Behavior equals motivation, ability, and prompt. Behavior equals motivation, ability, and prompt. You need all three to get the behavior.
Yeah.
You can't just have two. You can't have one. You need all three.
Yeah.
So what's prompting the behavior? Can you actually do it is the ability, right? And so, and do you have the motivation?
Yeah.
So do I actually have the motivation to transfer this accountability to somebody else? And that's why we talk a lot about freedom. Do you want more time to yourself? Do you want to go to your kid's baseball game? Do you want to take a trip without having to worry for a week or a month or 3 months, maybe? A lot of business owners couldn't ever step away from their business for a week, let alone a month or 2 months. That's the real test.
Yeah.
Can you step away without any major decisions or any minor decisions even for a whole month and just go away, go to Africa, go wherever and just say, you can't call me.
As you're saying all this, and I know this is all geared towards business owners because, as an owner, you have the ability to say, all right, I'm out of here for a week or two and doing whatever you want, travel, do whatever. And our employees or our business leaders don't always have that same flexibility. However, everything you're talking about right here kind of permeates or kind of goes all through an organization. If you're a leader, if you have to lead a team, right? Same stuff applies. You have to build the same type of, I guess you have to communicate. You have to have the right processes and accountability. And it just keeps going through the organization because it still opens up. If I'm a leader of a team and I feel like I'm always in the grind doing everyone's job, well, that's why I didn't take this position for that, right? And that's not really what the ownership wants from me either. And so it's not just business owners where this applies. It goes all the way through an organization.
It does. I'm not on the schedule at my stores, right?
Yep.
But if I'm needed to be there, I'm there.
That's right.
Like, I'm still the owner. Ultimately, it does stop at me.
That's right.
And you know what? One of the things I see as my biggest role as a leader of my business is to have my managers' backs. And when they need me, I am there. And that's what I want to. It's like they ask me, it's like, hey, listen, can you cover this weekend because we're like out and I'm going to a wedding, and it's like I'm there, no problem. And all of these different things, it's like, but if you here's the other thing, if they're calling on you and you always have to be there because they're always calling on you, then your process and accountability isn't right.
Right.
But from the same perspective, I don't get called on that much to do that kind of stuff, but when I do, they know that I have their back, right? And I'm there for the big events. We've got a big tent sale going on. It's a sort of a seasonal ending tent sale this weekend. So I'm working this weekend at our stores. It's not like I don't work, but ultimately I can pick and choose where I want to work and how I want to work within my business because I have the frameworks and the systems and the people in place that allow that to happen.
You run multiple businesses. How do you manage keeping them all thriving while you focus on the by still focusing on the big picture, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's that process look like for you?
We have a good meeting structure. And so, our team, we sit down on I'll give it to you in a brief format. So we have our yearly sort of planning of what we want to do out of the years. We have a quarterly plan, which happens on the same, Wednesday for a full day every quarter. And on the months that aren't the quarterly one, we have a half day monthly meeting with the management team so that are we in line to make our quarter, and the quarters, are we in line to make our year? And then we also have a weekly on that same Wednesday, which is a 1 hour. So we have a 1 hour on the 3 weeks that we're not meeting monthly. We have the half day that we're not meeting quarterly. We have the full day that we're not meeting yearly. And then we have our yearly meetings so that we're always in conversation around our goals. Are we hitting? Are we not? And you know what? I'm going to be honest. Our stores have not hit their goals this year. We are under our goal, and it's not fun. It's not fun having those conversations, but it's real.
Yeah.
And it's like, so what are we going to do? So that's why we popped up this tent sale this weekend. It's like, hey, listen, you know what? We've got more inventory than we wanted to. We've never done a tent sale in my 14 years of doing this, but I've got more inventory that I want. We want to get rid of through some stuff, and we want to hit a really good September. So let's these are the things. If we don't have the conversation, it just goes by. And at the end of the year, you've got all this stuff and you're like, well, what do I do with it? So let's be proactive about this stuff, working it through so that we can make the best of it. And it all happens with, this is CPA, communication about what we're trying to do, process, which is the meeting rhythm.
Yep.
And accountability. Who's got this? Am I going to be am I running the tent sale, or are you running the tent sale? Who's going to do the marketing for it? How are we getting it out there? Are we going to send it out to the list of 18,000 people? Or what are we doing here? Is the VA, do we need some stuff from our VA here to finish this stuff off? All of those things, if it's all in my head as the business owner, there's going to be balls dropping everywhere.
Yeah. What I love about what you're saying, especially towards the frequency of the meetings and the communication, is you don't let the problem get too big. It only gets bigger or becomes too big if whatever changes and solutions we come up with were the wrong ones. But at least we're attempting to do something. And you're going to quickly recognize that. It's kind of like digital marketing. Back in the day before digital, right? You're sitting here, you put out a campaign and then you wait 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Well, did it work? All right. Yep. And then you test something else. Whereas in digital, every day you're able to analyze, is it working or is it not? And you're able to adjust on the fly and constantly tweaking. So you're at the month end, at the end of every week, at the end of every month, there is no surprises. You should end up right where you're supposed to be. So it's beautiful. I love that. All right, if I have to master one thing, all right, as a business owner, to create a self-managing company or even a business, a leader, I got my own team. I want that team self-managed, so to speak. What's the one thing I got to master?
I think communication is the number one thing. And if you're a poor communicator, nobody's ever going to know what the expectations are. Nobody's going to.
Can that be taught, Pete? Can that be taught, or is that something?
I believe it can.
Okay.
I believe it can be, and it is something that can be learned. And you and I have already talked about being never-ending learning type people, and there's so many books on communication. There's so many different things. There are so many mentors out there. There are so many groups around better communication, whether it's even something as simple as getting into your local, speakers group where you're out in front of, speaking to small groups and things like that. There are just so many ways of becoming a better speaker. Yeah. And whether the speaking is internally, whether it's written form, people learn in different ways. And this is another piece of sort of the Colby side of my business in creating better teams. But, people learn in different ways. Some people read, some people hear, some people see. And, as business owners, as leaders in our businesses, we need to communicate in the ways that people want to receive information, not in ways that we want to communicate.
Yeah, well said. I look back, one of the biggest mistakes I've made, I go way back. I think I started the agency at 22. So I had no business training. I had no leadership training. I had none of that. It was self-taught, and then through different workshops and books and a lot of it, learning from failure along the way. We've all heard criticize in private, praise in public, right? I was the opposite early on. I would because I felt like I was so going to exactly what you're teaching people. I was so in the grind. I felt like, here's something they're doing wrong. I didn't view it as criticizing, because I just viewed it as tough love. Like, I'm going to educate this person on what they did wrong and how it should be done in public, because I want everyone to hear it, which will save me time, right? Yeah. It'll save me time, because I don't have the time to keep going around and handling this one-on-one. And then I had praise in private. And as I got better at that and realized, okay, that's not the best way to do this. The other thing I realized is, when you praise, you really have to come. And I think some people don't like the hard conversations. And I think it's important that when you praise in public, you come with a lot of emotion and enthusiasm, which is the opposite of what I used to do as well. I used to criticize with a lot of enthusiasm and passion. But I think when we criticize in private, that needs to be non-emotional. Does that make sense? In other words, I think it's important when we have to have a critical conversation. I hate to use the word criticize. When we have to educate or coach somebody up, that comes from, I think you got to take the emotion out of that and put the emotion in on the positive. What are your thoughts on that from a communication style?
Yeah, I love that. And a lot of the times, if we're having sort of these regular meeting flows, and everybody knows that, their name's beside the accountability portion of whatever we're going to talk about in this coaching session, they already know.
Yeah, you're right.
And so, you're not telling them something they don't know. The real thing here is, if you haven't aligned and assigned the accountability to them,
you're right,
formally, and now you're going at them and saying, hey, you didn't do this. And they're like, well, I didn't even know it was my job. This is the communication stuff we're talking about, right? This is the process. So you have to have the process in place that formally assigns the accountability and actually hands it over to them. And then when you hand it over to them, you can't be on top of them saying, you got to do this, you got to do this. It's like, listen, I've handed you this accountability. It's yours now.
Yeah.
And this is another issue that business owners have, right? They actually say, oh, you're in charge. I'm going to give you this title. And titles bother me, by the way. But anyway, it's just a little aside. But I'm giving you this title because you want a title. I really don't care what your title is. What I want to know is, what are you accountable for?
Yeah.
And, like if you're accountable for these things under whatever that title is, then let's have the conversations around those and let's coach up to that. And what can I do as the owner of the business here to help you through the challenges and frustrations that you're going to have in this accountability?
There's our, by the way, Cameron, there's our clip. There's our trailer right there. I mean, I don't care what your title is. I care what you're accountable for. That is well said. Let's shift directions just a little bit here. I want you to talk a little bit about the 5 Ds of unplanned business exit. I think most people, when they start a company, not to think that they're initially thinking about, wow, one day I'll exit and this and that. Some people probably don't even think about it, but
yeah.
I know that there's a lot of businesses that probably cost themselves a lot of money when they exit by not doing things right. Walk us through those. What are these 5 Ds and why they're important to plan for?
Yeah. I mentioned earlier, I used to be a business broker, and these days I'm a certified exit planner. So a lot of my time is getting people in, getting their businesses ready to sell over the next 2 to 5 years type thing, so they can maximize the value. And that's great when you have 2 to 5 years ahead of you. But the real reality of it is that about 50% of the businesses in North America transfer in an unplanned fashion. And those 5 Ds, well, yeah, those 5 Ds are here. The big one, death. Right?
Death, yeah.
People die.
That's right.
And do you plan for death? Not necessarily, right?
Yeah.
But it happens. Divorce. A lot of times in the divorce, and 50% of marriages are divorcing, right? So 50% of the business owners out there that are currently married are going to go through a divorce. And if that divorce leads to having to sell the business, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if that partner is actually a partner in the business too. That's a problem. Because how do you work all that? Do you have that set up?
I went through that, by the way.
What's that?
In a prior life, I went through that.
There you go. So you've lived this already.
Yeah.
Okay. Disability. We talked about the idea of going away for 1, 2, or 3 months for a nice little vacation to Africa or something like that. The other thing is, what happens if you're in a hospital bed for 1, 2, or 3 months because you got in a car accident? How does your business go? Will it survive if you are the key linchpin? If you couldn't talk because you were in a coma for 3 weeks, what would happen? Not saying that I wish this upon anybody, but I am saying that it's real. It does happen.
Mm-hmm.
Disagreements, partnership disagreements in particular. Many of us are in partnerships. What happens if your partner gets divorced? What happens if your partner has a disability problem? What happens if your partner dies? And they're the only person that can go in and sign a check, or they're the only person that, has the key to whatever, digital thing that you need to unlock to get the job done. The last one's distress, and distress is something we can never really think about, but, because we don't know when it's coming. And whether that's the distress of the economy, whether that's the distress of something like COVID, and that nobody ever would have ever thought of. What happens if something in our retail stores here in Canada, we were closed 22 weeks, 8 weeks one time, 8 weeks another time, 6 weeks another time through the course of 2 years, closed. Couldn't have a person in our store. All we could do was sell online, which we did a little bit of, but I mean, it's not our main business. How can you get through a downturn? How can you get through a distress of whatever? Another thing for a lot of people, if you have a car dealership, which I know you have a few, what happens if they elected to do the sewers out in front of your store and your entrance to the dealership was closed for 3 months? What happens? These things are the things that can actually cause a business to fold. depending on the resources, the backup plans, all of these other things that go along with all of these 5Ds. And the reality of it is most business owners haven't given any thought to those, or a very minor amount.
And are you saying that there's a right way to handle each one of these, or are you saying the right way to handle these 5 is to actually have a plan for the 5?
Yeah. I think all 5 of these need to at least have some sort of structure behind them. I really do. And it's going to be different for every person. It's going to be different for every business owner. But just using those as sort of headings, what happens if I die? Think about your family legacy. I mean, for most small business owners in North America, 70% of their wealth is tied up in their business. So they've got all the plans. They know what's going to happen in their financial portfolio. Their financial planner's like, yeah, we got all this signed off. It's going to go to your wife. It's going to go to your husband. It's going to go to your kids, all this kind of stuff. Have you done that with your business? Yet 70% of your business, of your wealth is there. And most people don't actually have a really good way of, laying it out. If I die, this is what happens. If I get divorced, this is what happens. If the partnership breaks up, this is what happens. Who's going to buy who out? Who's going to what? How is it going to be funded? What's the valuation of the business at the time of the breakup of the partnership? How do we determine that? How's it going to be funded?
I would imagine for disability, I mean, key man insurance, would that?
It would, but you still have all these decisions. And if you're the decision maker, getting back to the whole thing where we started it,
who's running it?
If you're the one that's still signing the paychecks, and you can't, problem. So, these are the things that if you're putting out the fires where it's like, hey, this guy just came in and the wheel fell off his Honda and something happened and I'm dealing with that today. And you're dealing with the day-to-day items within your business and you're not looking at these things, even from time to time. Like, pick one of these things and do your homework this quarter on it. What are you going to do for disability? Which gets back to the whole cross training thing. Does everybody have what they need? Can you find the information that you need to find in the filing system that we use in order for you to accomplish the tasks that need to happen in my absence?
Well, you said something that earlier in the show when it came to communicating, right?
Yeah.
There should never be a shock to anybody, right? When we communicate well, if we have the right processes and accountability set up, tough conversations are not a shock.
No.
I love that. I took that away and I actually jotted that down. Let me ask you this question, because everyone can agree there's no way to step away from operations and become more owner than operator unless you have a strong management team. So, what are the top 1 or 2 things to do and the top 1 or 2 things to avoid when you're trying to level up your management team or make it stronger?
Well, one of the things that a lot of small business owners don't do is share the numbers.
Yep.
They're afraid to share the numbers.
Yeah.
I'm an open book with the people that I'm asking to run my business because actually I'm asking them to own the numbers. So how can they not know the numbers if I'm asking them to own it?
And let's be clear on this. There are some people out there that think I share the numbers and it's just the surface level bullshit numbers that don't impact what you're really talking about. So dive a little bit deeper on that because I want to make sure everybody gets what you mean here.
Yeah. So for me, what we do, and I'll just go to our shoe stores with that particular management team. It's like they see everything. It's like I'm an open book. It's like, listen, here's what I have invested in this business. As any other investment in my portfolio, I expect a return on that. And that's without me working in it.
That's right.
Whatever that is, if it's $1 million for you or $10 million for you, it doesn't matter. So you've got whatever you have invested in your business. And what's that expected rate of return for you? And I would expect it to be higher than the stock market because it's more risky and it's less liquid. So if I was to take this $1 million or $10 million or whatever it is and invest it somewhere else and just let it sit, that's that's a portion, but this is a riskier one, harder to turn. So I need a little bit more than that. So this is, first of all, I expect this as a profit without me being involved. And if you need me involved, what's my rate? And, just like anything else, I want to get paid what I think I'm worth or what I think I could get somewhere else. And I want to pay my managers that too. So all of these things sort of come into play, and it's like, what's the expected return here? And if we have an expected return, then and everything's being hit, then you're going to hit your bonuses and goals, and everybody wins. But if there's any sort of shadiness, if there's any sort of gray area around numbers, there's always question with the management. That's a problem. And so from my perspective, they need to see how much we're spending in marketing, how much we're spending in digital marketing, how much we made from that digital marketing, getting back to your digital marketing side of things. They need to see how much the labor percentages are. They need to see what they are in relation to other industry standards, which I'm an onboard coach with the National Shoe Retailers Association. And I believe that whoever's listening here today, you should be a part of your organizations for the car dealership organization or for the insurance organization or the realtors organization, so that you can get the numbers from your organization that you can compare your business to.
I love the employee, I guess, I don't want to say cost, but investment ratio to the business, because when you are the employee and you're part of the team and all of a sudden business is cranking, right? Mm-hmm. Business is coming through. It can put a little stress it puts stress on the process. It puts stress on the capacity of what people can actually do. And the natural instinct, especially if you're not the owner, is to throw people at the problem. Mm. And so by constantly keeping those numbers visible and transparent, everyone understands that dynamic of like, it isn't, let's look at our process, right? Yeah. And I always say the easiest way to improve a process is increase sales. Every process looks good when you're slow. You want a better process, increase sales, you'll find out where it's weak. So
I agree.
Yeah.
And so from a dashboard perspective, it's like one of our dashboard items that we look at every week is hours. It's like, how many hours versus our sales do we have on the floor this week? And are we in line? And if we're not in line, do we think we're expecting because we have a tent sale this weekend? Like, I'm expecting we're going to have a lot more hours this week than we would last week because we need extra people on the floor for an event. But if you're like, all of these things come into alignment and start to happen when you're having these regular meetings that are going through the things that really matter, and you're looking at the dashboard that matters, because part of going from detail to dashboard is having the right numbers, Scott, Yep. And when you have the right numbers, then you can make the decisions, and so can your team, right? They can make the decisions that they need to make, because let's face it, if they've got up to the managerial side of the business with you, they're in, and let them be in. Don't keep them out. Let them be in with everything they need to make decisions for you, because if you don't, they're going to make the wrong decisions, or you're going to have to be involved in those decisions. And both of those, depending on where you're at in your business and your life, are things that you need to address.
Why do you think a lot of owners struggle with letting go? Even if they have a capable and a strong team.
Yeah, it's habitual. Getting back to, BJ's book, we create habits for ourselves. And, that first 1 to 3 years, you're just doing everything. You're in there. You're making every decision. You're making stuff happen. You're working your 70 to 100 hours a week. You're not seeing the family, all this kind of stuff. You get habitualized to working in that zone.
Yeah. There's a guilt that comes. You start feeling as you back away. There's this weird guilt that comes, internal pressure from like you're not giving what you should or something. I don't know.
I know. And it's hard to back away from that. Like you said, it's just really hard because we were habitualized into doing all this stuff.
Yeah.
But I think as we add process into it, as we add accountability into it, where do you start? You start with the low hanging fruit. Right? It's like, hey, listen, if you don't have a bookkeeper yet, you're still doing your books, get a bookkeeper. If you don't have, if you're still doing your payroll, use a payroll service. I mean, there's some things that you can add on quite easily to actually free yourself up some time. And when you start freeing yourself up some time, it kind of gets a little bit addictive, because now you're starting to think about things you haven't thought about in a long time, because you've been boiled down into those details, and you're starting to think about the what ifs.
Yeah.
And it's like, what if I do this? And how can I do this? And when you start thinking about the what ifs for a lot of entrepreneurs like you and me, it's exciting.
Yeah.
And it's like, I want to spend more time thinking about the what ifs. And you can't do that if you're doing all those detail things.
I say this jokingly, but it's true. It's a lot easier to come up with great ideas when you're not in the grind and you're thinking, when you're in the grind, you're thinking, well, that's a great idea, but I'm going to have to be the one doing it. It's a lot easier to come up with great ideas when you know you don't have to do it.
Well, here's the other thing, and you're doing it right now. Usually when we come up with these different ideas, we actually are okay with doing it, but we know we can't do it if we're still doing the other stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because most entrepreneurs like you and me, we are the ones to get the things rolling. Right. And then once we get it rolling to a point where we can align the process and assign the people, then we can start handing off. But we're most of the time good with these new projects and want to sort of go out and do that stuff. But if you can't free yourself up, one of my coaches, a great marketer, I know you're a marketer. One of my coaches is Dean Jackson, and Dean Jackson's just an absolute killer marketer. And, one of the things he said a long time ago was there are only 24 hours in a day. You can't use more and you can't use less. Like there are 24 hours.
Yeah.
And you can't buy more hours. You can only buy other people's time.
It's true.
So like if you think of it, there are very few things in life that are finite, but time is finite.
Yeah.
And like I said, one of my kids is off to Australia here today, and in the plane as we're chatting, it's like I had a finite amount of time with him before he's gone for a year. And it's like, no matter whether that's a business thing or a family thing, you only have, if the kids are going to a swim competition, that swim competition is that day. And if you're not there, you're not there. And those things happen in business too.
You often hear a lot of successful people talk about the one thing most valuable to them is time. And for me, it's not time. And here's why I say that. To me, focus and self-discipline is greater than time. And the reason I say that is because if I have great focus and great self-discipline, I'm making better use of my time, right? And all of a sudden, I get a lot more done in that 24 hours. But without focus and self-discipline, time can be very, there's never enough. And there's never enough even with it. So, I mean, share us a success story of a business owner who's transitioned from operator to owner using your frameworks.
Yeah, sure. I don't do a ton of one-on-one work anymore, but I still work with a great business owner, and his name is Nick, and he runs a company just outside of Chicago, and it's called Old Delhi Music, and they import all kinds of musical instruments, all sorts of things that are from India, essentially. So harmoniums and bazookas and all sorts of stringed instruments, percussion instruments, a variety of different things. And for many years, they did that on their own, for about 8 or 9 years, importing all of this stuff and selling it within North America. And then a few years ago, he opened, just during COVID, actually opened a factory in India building harmoniums. And that's when we started working together, just as he was opening that. And, COVID closed things down. He couldn't get over there. He had a partner over there. All sorts of different things were going on. And just last week, he sent me an email and he said, I just got another order from our wholesaler in Germany. By the way, they didn't have any wholesalers. He wasn't even making instruments 3 years ago, for another 300 instruments. And, these instruments go for $1,000 to $2,000, and a nice little wholesale order, his biggest wholesale order to date. And, we've set up wholesale networks around the area, around the world now for the instruments that he's making in India. He still has Old Delhi Music to support the North American market with all the other stuff, but he has his own lines of instruments that he's creating. A few years ago, Nick said to me, he goes, and they take a lot of vacations. They homeschool. They've got 4 kids, and one of the big things that they wanted to do was travel around while the kids were still young and travel around the US and go to all these different places and all that kind of stuff and run their business remotely. And he said, I can't get away from my business because my phone is always attached to my hip, even when I am away.
Yep.
And so one of the first things we did a few years ago was to detach his phone from his hip. And I can tell you, he has removed himself out of the detail. He's not involved in a lot of these different things. He's involved in these big decisions. One of the things we did was add the wholesale network into his business as he was making and manufacturing for his own. But he also, I'm like, let's get into wholesale. I mean, I understand the wholesale side of things because I'm a retailer too. So we worked through all of those different things, but he has other people that are doing all of that stuff. He's only been to his factory that he owns in India, I think about 3 times ever.
Yeah. I'm sitting here. The first thing I'm thinking about, when you go through COVID, and you started this story off with that, is all of us think our problems are the biggest problems. And man, try having a business that's in different countries where all of a sudden communication, holy crap, I can't even imagine. If I had to go through that, I can picture myself going through that, and that control that you think you have, that's gone. That forces it out.
He has 25 people building instruments in India, and he's only ever been to the factory about 3 times.
That's great. Right? I don't even know, how did businesses survive back in the day before cell phones without all these people making decisions all the time? I mean, think about that.
When I started, we talked about it early on. I had a pager on my hip, and it was a text pager, and I had an operator answering and texting me these pages, and I had, a fax machine. It's like, hey, can you fax me this stuff? And I'll get all of these different things. I mean, as much as we sort of will often say, I hate being connected all the time. Being connected has made business so much better, so much more efficient. So there are so many ways now that we can, we're here having this conversation right now that never could have been possible 5-10 years ago, really, at this quality and this level of conversation, video format, all of this other stuff that could have never happened. And so a lot of these technological advancements, and I think that's part of the communication piece, right? And it's part of the never-ending learning and understanding how we can communicate better, both within our team in person and outside of our team on digital formats and things like that in order to create a better business and a better life.
So finally, what's the one piece of advice you'd give a business owner, business leader who's feeling overwhelmed? What would you tell them?
Well, there's been a few good ones through here today. But the biggest thing is, I think, reel back. Yeah. Go back to when you first started your business and think about the things. And a lot of people, it's been 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 30 years in my case. But it's like, let's reel back to when you first decided to become a business owner. What was it that made that sort of switch from, I don't think I want to work for someone else, I think I want to work for myself? And we go back to those early days of thinking about why we became a business owner. If you're not living that dream yet, then you have some work to do.
Yeah.
If you're not, if those questions haven't been answered, if you're saying back then, it's like, oh, I want to spend more time with my family. I want to be I want to be the controller of my own financial future. All of these variety of different things of why people want to become a business owner. I want to do what I really love to do, not necessarily what I'm currently doing now, whatever the case is. Think about those. And if you're not living those, then some of the stuff we've talked about today, you need to work on. And it's okay if you haven't got all this stuff in place. Most of us haven't. It's okay. But it's not okay not to start on it.
Yeah.
So where do you start? You start with the low hanging fruit. You start with putting in, like, how do we open the store in the morning? Like, when the first person opens the key, what happens? Like, lay out the process. Who's in charge of that? And all of these different, and you start tacking on these different things to free yourself up of doing some of these things in order to live the life that you want to live as a business owner, because your business should prop up your life. You shouldn't always have to prop up your business.
Yeah, well said. All right, Pete, I want to thank you a ton here for sharing your insights with us. This is something that, I just talked to so many business owners, and I know this is something that hits home for a lot of them, and some of them won't admit it.
Yeah.
But man, as I said earlier, when I'm trying to get people to our leadership retreats, the number one excuse is I can't get away. I'm too busy. I'm too this and that, which goes to the heart of this. If you are a prisoner to your business, then like you just stated, you've got a lot of work to do. Because my gosh, even if, let's just say you don't have a partner, any one of these 5Ds could impact that business, and you're not prepared for if you don't have the right leadership team in place and management team. So I love what you gave us today. Your journey, your expertise in helping entrepreneurs basically transition from operators to owners, extremely valuable. So thank you very much. And for our listeners, I hope you're walking away with actionable strategies that you can start implementing, integrating into your business so you can gain more freedom and take your life back. That's the whole point of this episode. We've learned a lot today about the importance of frameworks, accountability, communication, long-term planning. If you're serious about taking the next step forward, towards building a business that doesn't own you, I encourage you to download Pete's. He's got a free resource and I want to make sure I get this right, Pete. The 10 Laws to Business Leadership, correct?
It's the 10 Laws of Moving from Operator to Owner. Yeah.
All right. The 10 Laws of Moving from Operator to Owner, and simplifyingentrepreneur.com/laws, correct?
That's it. Yeah.
All right. So in this link, everyone, will be in if you follow us at meplusultra.com, it'll be in the show description. We'll have a link there to make that easy for you as well. But it's simplifyingentrepreneur.com/laws. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to Me Plus Ultra at meplusultra.com and the Me Plus Ultra Network on YouTube to keep up with all the latest content. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode of Business, Bourbon, and Cigars. Thank you, everyone.